It's a simple idea, maybe one of the simplest. You have power over here, you need it over there. But you don't have a wire. So you send it through the air, that's it, that's the dream. It's a dream of a world without tangled cables and giant transmission towers marching across the landscape. A world where a village in the middle of a desert could get electricity from a satellite in the sky. A world where an electric airplane could refuel in midair. Can we do it? Can we actually beam useful amounts of energy wirelessly across the planet? The short answer is yes. The physics is possible. We do it all the time on a small scale. Your phone might charge on a wireless pad. Your electric toothbrush probably does. Those work by sending energy over a few millimeters, but across a planet, that's a whole different problem. The long answer is much more complicated. It's a story about a brilliant inventor, giant lasers, satellites covered in solar panels, and a whole lot of really hard engineering problems that we are only just starting to solve. The whole idea feels futuristic, but it's actually very old, and it starts with one man, Nikola Tesla. Around the turn of the 20th century, Tesla was obsessed with this idea. He wasn't just thinking about charging a phone, he was thinking about powering the entire world wirelessly. His vision was grand. He imagined the Earth itself as a giant conductor. He believed he could send electricity through the ground in the upper atmosphere, and anyone with the right kind of receiver, a special antenna, could just pull power right out of the air. For free, he built a strange and magnificent tower on Long Island, New York. It was called Wardenclyffe Tower. It looked like a giant mushroom, a 187-foot tall structure with a huge metal dome on top. This was his transmitter, his broadcast station for global power. He believed this tower could energize the very air we breathe. He wanted to light up cities, power ships at sea, and send messages across the globe, all without a single wire. It was a beautiful idea, and it failed completely. Tesla ran out of money. His investors, men like J.P. Morgan, were not interested in giving away free power. They were interested in selling it, and you sell it by putting a meter on a wire that goes into someone's house. Marconi had just sent a wireless message across the Atlantic using radio waves, which was a much more practical and profitable use of the technology at the time. Tesla's grand vision seemed like a mad fantasy. Wardenclyffe was torn down in 1917 and sold for scrap. The dream of global wireless power went dormant for a long, long time, but the dream never really died. The science behind it just needed to catch up with the ambition. So how does it actually work? How do you send power? Not just information through the air. It comes down to electromagnetic waves. Light is an electromagnetic wave, so are radio waves, microwaves, and X-rays. They are all just energy moving through space. The trick is to get that energy from point A to point B without it spreading out and becoming useless. Think of it like this. A regular light bulb sends light out in all directions. If you're standing a few feet away, you can read a book. If you're 100 feet away, the light is too weak. The energy is spread out too much. This is called the inverse square law. For every doubling of the distance, the power you receive drops to 1/4 of what it was. It's a brutal law of physics for anyone trying to send power a long way. The light bulb is an inefficient way to send energy to a specific target. Now, think of a laser pointer. It's also sending out light, but it's a focused beam. The energy is concentrated into a tiny spot. You can point it at a wall 100 feet away and still see a bright dot. You have beaten the inverse square law, at least for a little while, by keeping the energy from spreading out. Wireless power transmission works on the same principle. You don't use a light bulb. You use a laser, or something very much like it. Instead of sending the energy out in all directions, you create a focused beam and aim it at a receiver. The two main technologies being explored for this are microwaves and lasers. Microwaves are a great choice. They are a type of radio wave the same time your microwave oven uses to heat up food. But don't worry, we're not talking about cooking the sky. The beams used for power transmission would be much, much less dense. A key advantage of microwaves is that they pass through clouds and rain pretty well. This is important if you're beaming energy to Earth from space. The system would have two main parts: a transmitter and a receiver. The transmitter would take electricity, convert it into microwaves, and use a very large antenna, like a satellite dish, to focus those microwaves into a tight beam. Then it would aim that beam at the receiver. The receiver is the clever part. It's called a rectenna, which is short for rectifying antenna. It's basically a grid of tiny antennas, each connected to a small circuit with a diode. Each little antenna captures a tiny bit of microwave energy. The diode then converts that microwave energy back into direct current DC electricity. You combine the electricity from all the millions of tiny antennas in the rectenna, and you have usable power. It's like a solar panel, but instead of capturing sunlight, it's capturing microwaves. Lasers are the other option. The principle is the same. Convert electricity into laser light, focus it into a beam, and aim it at a receiver. The receiver in this case would be a specialized solar panel, one tuned to the specific color or wavelength of the laser light. This makes it very efficient at converting the laser light back into electricity. Lasers have an advantage. They can be focused into much tighter beams than microwaves over very long distances. This means your transmitter and receiver can be smaller. The big problem with lasers is that they get blocked by clouds, fog, and rain. A cloudy day could mean a power outage. That's a major issue for a reliable energy source. So the basic science is there. We know how to convert electricity to waves and back again. The real challenge is scale. Doing it over thousands of kilometers, doing it efficiently, and doing it safely. This is where the idea comes back from the dead, not as a mad inventor's dream, but as a serious engineering proposal. The most ambitious version of this is called space-based solar power. The idea is simple and brilliant. The Earth has a day and night cycle. It has clouds, it has seasons. All these things interrupt solar power on the ground. But in space, the sun shines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the sunlight up there is more intense because it doesn't have to pass through our atmosphere. So, the plan goes like this. You launch giant satellites into a very high geostationary orbit. This is an orbit about 36,000 kilometers up, where a satellite stays fixed over the same spot on Earth. These satellites would be covered in solar panels, huge arrays stretching for kilometers. They would soak up sunlight constantly. Then, these satellites would use that solar energy to power a giant microwave transmitter. This transmitter would form a narrow beam of energy and aim it down at a specific receiving station, a rectenna on the ground. The rectenna on Earth would be huge, several kilometers across, a vast field of mesh antennas. It would collect the microwave energy and convert it back into electricity, which would then be fed into the normal power grid. The beauty of this system is that it could provide constant, clean power day and night, rain or shine. One satellite could potentially power a large city. A constellation of these satellites could power the entire planet. They could direct power to wherever it's needed. Imagine a hurricane knocks out the power grid in Florida. A satellite could be retasked to beam emergency power directly to a rectenna in the disaster zone. It would be a truly global energy grid. This isn't science fiction. Major countries and organizations are actively working on it. So Japan is a leader in this field. As a country with limited natural resources, it has a strong incentive to find new energy sources. The Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, has been researching space-based solar power for decades. They have successfully run ground-based tests, beaming microwave power over short distances. They have a roadmap that aims for a small demonstration satellite in the coming years, with the goal of having a full-scale commercial system later this century. The United States military is also very interested. Imagine a forward operating base in a remote, hostile area. Fuel has to be brought in by truck convoys or by air, which is dangerous and expensive. What if you could just beam power to the base from a satellite? The Air Force Research Laboratory has been running experiments like the Space Solar Power Incremental Demonstrations and Research Project, or SPIDER. In 2023, a team at Caltech launched a test satellite called the Space Solar Power Demonstrator. It had a device on board called MAPLE, which stands for Microwave Array for Power Transfer Low Orbit Experiment. In a historic first, MAPLE successfully collected solar power in space, converted it to microwaves, and beamed a detectable amount of energy to a receiver on the roof of a building at Caltech. It was a tiny amount of power, just enough to light up a couple of small LEDs, but it worked. It proved the principle in the actual environment of space. China has also declared its intention to build a space-based solar power station. They are planning a multi-phase program with the goal of having a megawatt-level station in orbit by 2030 and moving to gigawatt-level systems by 2050. These are ambitious timelines, but beaming power from space is the grand prize. There are also more down-to-earth applications being developed right now. A company in New Zealand called Emrod is working on point-to-point wireless power transmission on the ground. Their idea isn't to power the whole world, but to solve last-mile problems. For example, instead of running power lines over difficult terrain like mountains or across bodies of water to reach a remote community, you could set up a transmitter on one side and a rectenna on the other. You just beam the power across. It could be cheaper, faster, and more environmentally friendly than building traditional infrastructure. They have a working prototype and have partnered with a power company to test it. Their system uses microwaves and includes safety features like a curtain of low-power lasers around the main beam. If anything, like a bird or a drone, breaks the laser curtain, the power beam shuts off instantly. This points to one of the biggest questions people have about this technology. Is it safe? When you hear giant microwave beam from space, you might imagine a death ray. It's a reasonable concern. The reality is much more mundane. The power density of the beam would be low. The current designs for space-based solar power plan for a beam that at its center would be about as strong as the midday sun. You wouldn't want to stand in it for a long time, just as you wouldn't want to stare at the sun. But it wouldn't instantly cook you. It would feel warm. As you move away from the center of the beam, the power density drops off very quickly. Safety systems would be essential. The beam would have to be incredibly precise. If the aiming system failed, the beam would have to shut down in milliseconds. The rectenna on the ground would continuously send a pilot signal up to the satellite. If the satellite didn't receive that "I'm here, I'm okay" signal, it would stop transmitting. The area around the rectennas would be restricted, just like the area around airports or other industrial facilities. And for the point-to-point systems like MRODs, the laser safety curtain is a practical way to protect wildlife and aircraft. So safety is a solvable engineering problem, but it's not the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdles are efficiency and cost. Let's talk about efficiency first. Every time you convert energy from one form to another, you lose some. It's a fundamental law of thermodynamics. In a wireless power system, you have a lot of conversions. First, you convert sunlight to DC electricity on the solar panels. That's maybe 30 to 40% efficient with the best space-grade panels. Then, you convert that DC electricity into microwaves. That step is pretty efficient, maybe 85%. Then you transmit the microwaves through space and the atmosphere. You lose some energy here as the beam spreads out slightly, even with a massive antenna. You also lose a little bit to absorption by water vapor in the atmosphere. Then the rectenna on the ground has to convert the microwaves back into DC electricity. This is also quite efficient, perhaps 85 to 90%. Finally, you might need to convert that DC power to the AC power that our grid uses, which involves another small loss. When you add up all those losses, the final end-to-end efficiency might be somewhere in the single digits. Let's say 7%. That means for every 100 watts of sunlight that hits the solar panel in space, you only get 7 watts of usable electricity on the ground. Early systems will likely be even less efficient than that. Engineers are working to improve every step of this chain. But it's a huge challenge. If your system is inefficient, you need to make it bigger to get the same amount of power out. And that leads directly to the second, even bigger problem, cost. The cost of this is astronomical, literally. Think about what it takes to build a space-based solar power station. The satellites would be massive, the largest structures ever put into space. They would weigh thousands of tons. We would have to launch all that material into orbit. Even with reusable rockets like SpaceX's Starship, which promise to dramatically lower the cost of launch, we are talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of launches for a single power station. The solar panels, the microwave transmitters, the control systems all have to be designed to survive in the harsh environment of space for decades. They have to withstand radiation, extreme temperature swings, and micrometeoroid impacts. That makes them incredibly expensive to build. And then there's the rectenna on the ground. A receiving station for a gigawatt of power would cover a huge area, maybe 10 kilometers in diameter. That's a lot of land. It would be a delicate mesh structure, so you couldn't really use the land for much else, though some designs propose raising it off the ground to allow for farming or wildlife to exist underneath. Still, it's a massive piece of infrastructure. When you add up the research and development, the manufacturing, the launches, and the ground stations, the price tag for a single space-based solar power station could be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. That's a staggering amount of money. The electricity it produces would have to compete with solar and wind power on the ground, which are getting cheaper every year. It's hard to make the economic case right now. Proponents argue that the costs will come down. Manufacturing can be automated. We could even mine materials from the moon or asteroids to build the satellites in space, avoiding the cost of launching from Earth. But that's a very long-term vision. Beyond the technical and economic challenges, there are political ones. Who owns these power satellites? Who controls them? A satellite in geostationary orbit is over a specific part of the globe. A nation that controls a fleet of power satellites would have immense geopolitical power. They could literally turn the lights off for another country. Could the technology be weaponized? While the beam itself isn't a death ray, the ability to direct huge amounts of energy from space is a dual-use technology that makes military planners nervous. There would need to be international treaties and agreements to manage this, and those are notoriously difficult to achieve. So where does that leave us? We have a technology that is scientifically possible. We have small-scale demonstrations that prove it works. We have a grand vision for clean, constant global energy. But we also have monumental challenges in efficiency, cost, and politics. It's easy to be cynical and say it will never happen. That it's another one of those futuristic ideas, like flying cars, that is always just around the corner. But that might be too pessimistic. Technology often develops in small steps. We won't wake up tomorrow to find a giant satellite beaming power to New York. The first applications will be niche, where the high cost doesn't matter as much. Powering remote military bases is a perfect example. The cost of getting fuel to some locations is already so high that wireless power could be a cheaper and safer alternative. Disaster relief is another. After an earthquake or tsunami, when the local grid is destroyed, a transportable rectenna could be flown in to provide critical power for hospitals and rescue operations. Powering drones is a big one. Long-endurance surveillance drones could stay in the air for weeks or months, getting their power from a beam on the ground or from another higher-flying aircraft. Electric airliners on long-haul flights could get a top-up charge as they fly, allowing them to be smaller and more efficient. And maybe the first space-based systems won't be for Earth at all. They might be for the moon. A lunar base will need a lot of power. A solar array on the moon's surface will be in darkness for 2 weeks at a time. A satellite in lunar orbit could collect sunlight and beam it down to the base, providing constant power. On the moon, there's no atmosphere to absorb the beam and no birds to fly through it. It's a much simpler problem to solve. Building a power station for the moon could be the perfect stepping stone to building one for Earth. So, the path forward is probably not one giant leap, but a series of small, practical steps. Each step will improve the technology, make it more efficient, and bring the cost down. The rectennas will get better at converting microwaves, the transmitters will become more precise. The solar panels will become lighter and more effective. Reusable rockets will make launch costs plummet. Can we beam energy wirelessly across the planet? Yes, we can. The question is not if it's possible, but if we can make it practical, affordable, and safe. It's no longer a question of physics. It is now a question of engineering, economics, and political will. It's a long road. It will take decades of work. It will require huge investments and international cooperation. There will be failures and setbacks, but the dream that Nikola Tesla had over a century ago, the dream of cutting the last cord and sending power freely through the air, is no longer just a dream. It's a real, tangible problem that very smart people are working to solve, and if they succeed, it could fundamentally change our relationship with energy, and in doing so, change the world. The power lines and extension cords of today might one day seem as old-fashioned as gas lamps and horse-drawn carriages. You would just look up and the power would be there.